Welcome to part 3, and we are going to talk about the hidden revenue leaks that happen. We are 3 weeks into this series, and today we are talking more about the money that you're losing that never shows up on a report. These are the opportunity costs, the hidden revenue leaks that only become visible when you have proper revenue operations. And I promise you, they're costing you more than you think. And I've observed this pattern periodically. A CEO looks at the dashboard and sees a healthy pipeline, good conversion rates, strong bookings, and they pat themselves on the back. Marketing hits MQL targets, sales hit quota, customer service is strong, has strong NPS scores. What could go wrong? But somehow the growth isn't materializing at the rate it should. The efficiency is not improving. The magic number is not where it needs to be. And why? Because there are leaks everywhere in the revenue engine. And without revenue ops and the horizontal view, you cannot see them. It's like trying to fill a bathtub with the drain partially open. You're pouring water in, the investments in, and some of it stays, but you're working much harder than you should to get the results you're getting. So let me walk you. Let me walk you through the major categories of leaks that I've observed because I want to make this tangible. And the leak number 1, data decay and data quality issues. Many companies with a lot of CRM data have outdated data or wrong data. The contact information is stale. The company information is outdated. The opportunity data is incomplete. That means your sales team is calling wrong numbers, emailing addresses that bounce, and targeting decision makers who might have already left the company months ago. Think about that. Think about what this actually is costing. Your marketing spend is partly wasted because you're targeting ghosts. Your sales productivity is lower because reps are spending time on activities that cannot possibly generate revenue. Your forecasting is unreliable because it's based on garbage data. But none of this shows up as a line item in your expense report. It is just silent inefficiency that bleeds you dry. I worked with a company that was spending about $2 million a year on marketing to generate leads. $2 million. When we audited their database, we found that 35% of their contacts in the marketing automation system had bad data. Wrong email, wrong company, wrong title, duplicates. They were essentially throwing away hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, marketing to people they could not reach or who were not real opportunities in the first place. However, once RevOps, they implemented the data quality processes and created governance around it, their cost per qualified lead dropped by 30% without changing their marketing strategy at all. They just stopped wasting money on bad data. Leak number 2, process gaps and inefficiencies. These are the places where work stops or slows down and no one is tracking it. I've observed deals that sit in legal review for weeks, quotes that sit with finance waiting for approval, contracts that sit with procurement on the customer side with no visibility into status. All of these extends into your sales cycle, it pushes revenue into future quarters, and it ties up your sales capacity on deals that are just sitting idle. So here's a personal example. I worked with a B2B company where deals sat in legal review for an average of 8 days. Nobody was tracking this. It wasn't on anyone's dashboard. Sales would complain informally that legal was slow, and legal would say they were waiting on sales for information. And meanwhile, every single deal, we are losing 8 days of velocity. And time kills deals. When RevOps start measuring this, they found that 60% of the delay was because sales was not providing complete information up front. They would send contracts to legal with missing details, and legal would have to come back with questions. And sales would take a few days to respond, and then there's there's back and forth, and RevOps comes in. What do? They create a pre-legal checklist. They train sales on what legal needs and built it into the workflow. The legal review time dropped by 7 days, so 1 day. And that 7-day improvement across every deal meant that they could close 15%, 20% more deals per quarter with the same sales capacity just by removing some friction from the process. Now you multiply that kind of inefficiency across your entire revenue cycle. What happens? From lead to opportunity, from opportunity to close to onboarding, from onboarding to expansion, you start to see how much revenue is leaking away through pure process inefficiencies. Leak number 3, the handoff tax. Every time a prospect or customer moves between teams, there's a handoff. marketing to sales, sales to implementation, implementation to customer success, and then customer success back to sales for expansion. And I've observed that in most companies, critical information gets lost in every single handoff. The prospect has to repeat to themselves why they bought and what are they trying to achieve disappear. All the tech stack and the processes they bought into, their achievement and their progress completely disappears at that point. Promises that were made don't get documented anywhere. The relationship, it kind of feels fragmented from the customer's perspective, and quietly, all the conversion rates start dropping. I've observed this handoff tax. It can cost companies 10 to 20% of the conversion rates at every stage. And think about what that means cumulatively. If you lose 15% of leads in the marketing to sales handoff, then another 15% in the sales to implementation handoff, and then another 10% in the implementation to customer success handoff, what happened? You're only realizing about 60% of the potential value from an initial marketing investment. The other 40%, it leaked away through bad handoffs. You see what I mean? So here's what this looked like at one company I worked with. They had good lead generation programs. They had decent sales conversion, but horrible renewal rates. When we tracked individual customer journeys, we found that customers who had smooth handoffs, where information flowed cleanly between teams and they did not have to repeat themselves, the renewal rates were about 30 percentage points higher than the customers who experienced friction during transitions. The company implemented RevOps process for handoffs. If you're able to do that well, through structured transition meetings, through required documentation, having standard customer-facing transition emails that showed continuity, then renewal rate will improve significantly in the first year, second year, third year. That improvement alone, when it happened, was worth millions in retained revenue that would otherwise have churned. Leak number 4, misalignment on ideal customer profile. This is subtle, but incredibly expensive. I've observed companies where marketing, sales, and customer success all have slightly different ideas about who the ideal customer is. Marketing is targeting based on, firmographics. Sales is qualifying based on budget and authority. Customer success wishes everyone would stop signing customers in certain industries because they churn at very high rates. So what's the result? So the marketing, they generate leads that sales does not want to work with. And sales closes deals that the customer success struggles to retain. And so what happens? The customer's CAC keeps going up and up and up because they're chasing the wrong customers, and the LTV keeps going down because they're signing customers who don't stick around. I observed a SaaS company where with the sales closing deals in the retail, they loved closing deals in the retail industry. They had big names, nice logos, good deal sizes, everything looked good. But customer success knew that retail customers had incredibly high churn rates because the product was not really built for the use case. Sales was simply incentivized to close deals, period. So they kept selling to retail. But customer success was fighting a losing battle trying to make these customers successful. So when RevOps steps in, they finally brought all the data together. Retail customers had 60% first-year churn versus 15% for other industries. Implementation took twice as long. Support tickets were 3 times as high. And when you did the full economic analysis, the company was losing money on every retail customer they signed up. They were spending more to acquire and support these customers than those customers would ever pay back. And once this was visible, once this was surfaced, they made the hard decision to completely stop pursuing retail. Sales were not happy. They were not happy in the short term, but the company's unit economics improved dramatically, and they focused their resources on segments where they could actually win. But without having RevOps, analyzing the full customer journey economics, they would have kept bleeding money on bad fit customers while wondering why their growth was not profitable. There's leak number 5. There's this thing called the invisible sales cycle time. Let me explain what that is. This one shocked me when I first encountered it, by the way. Our company thought their average sales cycle was 73 days because that's what Salesforce said. The report said that. Time from opportunity creation to closed won. Reasonable. They were managing the sales team to that metric. But when RevOps started measuring the complete buyer journey from first meaningful engagement to closed won, the actual cycle was 127 days. Almost 2 months of the sales cycle was invisible. It was happening in email threads, in-person conversations at conferences, exploratory calls, maybe, before anyone even created an opportunity, internal deliberation on the buyer's side that sales had no visibility into. So why does this matter? Because the company was making capacity planning decisions based on a 73-day cycle when the reality was 127 days. They were not hiring enough salespeople soon enough. They were underestimating how much pipeline they needed to build to hit their targets. And they were missing opportunities to accelerate the parts of the cycle they could actually influence. Again, if once RevOps stepped in, they mapped the full journey. And they started measuring it properly. They identified that the invisible time was mostly buyers doing internal research and building consensus before engaging formally with sales. The company adjusted their strategy. They created better content for the research phase. They got sales involved earlier in the process. And they trained the sales on how to accelerate internal consensus. The actual end-to-end cycle time came down because of these efforts, and in 3-4 weeks, people started seeing noticeable differences. They were now starting to forecast the pipeline a little more accurately than the first time. And here's what ties all these leaks together. None of them are anyone's fault individually. Marketing is not deliberately creating bad data. Sales is not intentionally wasting time on process gaps, and neither is customer service. They're not trying to make handoffs painful. Everyone is optimizing their own function and doing their job as it is defined, hitting their individual metrics. The leak only happens in the spaces between the functions, and in those transitions, there is the lack of end-to-end visibility. Think of little barriers in these transitions. In the absence of someone who owns the complete revenue journey and has the authority and responsibility to plug those leaks, that is what revenue operations does. It makes the invisible visible. It measures the unmeasured. It optimizes the end-to-end journey, not just the individual pieces. And when you do this well, you find that you can often grow 20 to 30% faster with no incremental investment, just by stopping the leaks. So next week, we'll talk about how to actually build this function in your organization. What is the structure? What is the timing? What is the team composition? And more importantly, what are the quick wins that prove value early so you can build momentum? See you then. Thank you.